Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to part two of our webinar series. My name is Melissa Martin. I am with ATS Lab Midwest and Mission Learning Systems. Really excited to share with you all about how you can fund your school's $1 million vision, thinking about creative ways we can find and support funding for all of our STEM and technical education initiatives. This is part two of a two-part webinar series. So if you missed last week, more to come on what we covered. All right, without further ado, I'd like to tell you about our wonderful guest that we have on today. You'll be hearing shortly from Matt Kirkner, who is president of ATS Lab Midwest and Mission Learning Systems, as well as our subject matter expert and just an incredible expert in the world of philanthropic giving, Michael Frona. He will be joining us shortly as well to talk all things funding for K-12 education. So I'm going to bring Matt on. And Matt, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what folks missed if they weren't here last week.
Absolutely, Melissa. Well, thank you so much and for the facilitation here. Excited to get Michael on really shortly and really excited to have a whole group of phenomenal individuals joining us this week for this webinar. Super, super excited for what we have to share with you. And certainly, if you missed last week's edition, you missed a ton. And you can go back and check that out on YouTube. But just to give you a little bit of a feel for the things that we talked about after we made sure that people were familiar with Michael and his incredible background in terms of philanthropy and development, has a great, great history of doing really important work. We got people familiar with Michael, and then we dove in to the current state of philanthropy. There were a whole bunch of statistics, data. Michael stays on top of all of that to give us a sense of who's giving, why they're giving, how much they're giving. And we talked all about that. Again, go back and check that out on last week's edition of this webinar series. We also talked about some of the mistakes that people make in public outreach. And Michael has been doing this for a long time. He wasn't the expert that he is today when he started, and he has learned a lot of things through fighting the battles of working with phenomenal people, getting them excited about a whole wide array of different types of projects, be they in education, nonprofits, or otherwise. And so we talked all about some of the mistakes that he made early on and how to avoid those mistakes. Again, you'll find all of that on last week's YouTube channel and last week's YouTube edition of this webinar series. And finally, we talked about his framework for giving. We are going to talk in just a moment. We're going to give you a review of that because it does a really good job of setting up the expectations and setting up the topic for this week's discussion. So we'll cover that framework for giving in just a moment. Before we do that, a couple other reminders, things that we also covered with you last week. Number one is we have people from all over the United States and all over different backgrounds and different disciplines in education joining us for that webinar. Maybe you're a teacher, a tech ed teacher, or a STEM teacher, and you're trying to figure out how you can engage with your community, how you can engage with individuals that are close to you, or maybe people that aren't close to you in terms of supporting the work that you're doing economically and otherwise. Perhaps you're a superintendent or a district administrator looking at how do you do things on a district-wide basis? How do you deal and work with some of those individuals maybe that are engaged with your school board? Maybe they're coming to your open house. Maybe they're coming to events at your particular institution. Certainly opportunities for you to learn in this webinar series as well, whether you're at a tech college, whether you're at a university, whether you're in a K-12 district, but especially this week for those of us in our K-12 communities, administrators, CTE coordinators, principals, teachers, instructors. There's going to be something for every single one of you in this particular webinar. Final thing that we want to cover is that this is a service that we are providing as part of Lab Midwest and our sister companies, ATS Midwest and Mission Learning Systems, working with school districts in finding opportunities to engage with community members to support your endeavors. I can't tell you how often I talk to people who are really excited about the future of STEM or technical education. They've lined up terrific curriculum. They have the perfect learning systems and hands-on opportunities for their students to learn. The only thing that's standing in between them and achieving their dreams for their students and their communities is being able to fund those dreams. We all know that technical education and STEM education is not inexpensive, especially if we're doing it the right way. And that means using hands-on learning systems for our experiential learners. And in order to do that, we have to have funding. Funding can come from a lot of different places. Sometimes it's a referendum, sometimes it's millage, sometimes it's other state funding. Maybe it's a federal grant that you applied for, maybe it's Perkins funding. Those are all great sources of funding, but one that often goes overlooked and is actually probably the most prosperous form of funding when we do it right is philanthropy and development through private donors. And that's what this is all about. So just a reminder that Lab Midwest offers this as a service. Michael Frona is a member of our team. He is working with school districts all over 7 states, again, with our sister companies, ATS Midwest and Mission Learning Systems, to show our customers, clients, and people who aren't even our customers how they can do a better job of working with their communities to develop additional financial resources to drive their programs forward. So, with that, Michael, I think this is just an absolutely perfect time to introduce my dear friend, Michael Frona, somebody that we have been working arm in arm with as we drive the world of technical education and STEM education forward as we secure the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent, which is our mission at ATS Lab Midwest and Mission Learning Systems. Michael, awesome to have you with us again this week, and thanks so much for taking some time.
Good afternoon, everyone, and whatever your time of day you're watching this, I'm glad you're with us again. It's a delight because Matt, as you're articulating so well, STEM education is a significant investment, but it's the right investment. And if we can help today and help our participants understand better how to raise that money to get those dreams started and finished, we're all about that.
And getting those dreams started and finished is exactly what we're doing here on this webinar series. And so excited to be doing this alongside you. I mentioned a moment ago, Michael, last week we talked about the framework of giving. And as we were thinking about the strong message for this week, I think it's really important that we take a moment and just put that into perspective for our viewers. Talk about what that framework of vision, or framework of giving, I should say, is briefly, and make sure that our listeners have an understanding of how we're segueing from what they learned last week into what we're covering this week.
When we think about the cycle of giving, oftentimes we think about one thing, and that's when will the money arrive? And there's a whole lot more, and this engagement roadmap shows that there's a whole lot more to this process. We start with the individual story, and it's not our story. It's not a school story. It's not a district story. It's not a campus story. It's what are the people in our community thinking about relative to getting students ready in their community for their future. So we take those stories, we listen to those stories, we learn about those stories, and we begin to overlay our stories about what we're doing inside the classroom and inside our campus buildings in order to match the stories that are already being discussed and written in our communities. When we get to that point and we integrate those stories, this is the key element of this entire cycle, and that's the inspiration piece. Often we go from here's our opportunity and what we call our needs, which we're going to address in a little bit, because it's really not a need, but it is an opportunity. How do we go from needs and they go right to asking for the money? But we forget that we have to inspire people. And I want to point out here a key statistic that it's worth remembering from last week, or if you're just listening this week, is that $19,000 per second $19,000 per second is donated every day in the United States, over 617 billion in 2025. So when we think about, is this a money issue? Not really. It's an inspirational, it's a storytelling, it's an integration opportunity we have, and then we can make the invitation. And again, one of the mistakes that organizations have made is they stop after the invitation. And we're going to show you ways today how you can not only ask for and invite the gift, but how do you inform them about the impact and then eventually get to show them and get them involved in investments because that just continues the loop of additional inspiration.
Absolutely. Really, really important to make sure that we're thinking about it. And I've had people reach out to me, Michael, over the years and say, here's our idea. Are you willing to give? And it's like, wait a minute. You got to, we have to get somebody excited about that. We have to give them a why. We have to make that part of something that's important to them, part of their ability to change the world. And, in as long as it's going to take me to say this next sentence, um, there's $19,000, as you suggest, coming into or out of the world of philanthropy into world worthy organizations. And in the time it takes me to say this sentence, that's like $250,000 that flowed into worthy organizations. How can we make those organizations, the organizations that are on the webinar today, that are listening to the words that we have to say? And the answer, I think, starts with considering who might be those individuals, who might be those organizations in our community, in our networks, who might be willing to be part of what we're doing. Who are those people that we might approach about being a part of the efforts that we're taking, that are taking place in our K-12 district? So for that reason, we're going to ask our audience to just take a couple minutes here and answer this question. Think about 3 people in your network that you're already thinking about that you could invite to support the work that you're doing in your district, in your STEM programs, in your tech ed programs. Take a moment, write down 3 people, 3 organizations that you think you should be engaged with as you seek out people, as Michael puts it, that could be inspired toward the incredible work you're doing. We'll give you just a moment to write those names down.
And Matt, while our participants are writing those names down, I just remind them that it doesn't have to be necessarily new people. It could be people you already have engaged at one level and you want to deepen that relationship. So while you're creating your list, think of brand new relationships that are established at some level in your network, but also those that may already be connected to your school that you could deepen.
All right. So by now, Michael, I'm sure people have an idea. They're visualizing these individuals, to your point, either somebody that's already engaged with their district or somebody new that they could spend some time with, getting them excited about the great things that are going on in the individual K-12 district. As they're thinking about that, what do you think it takes to get ready for us to have those conversations with the people that they've just identified? So cover, if you would, the steps that you think are important in terms of preparing ourselves to have those conversations.
My best guess is that most of the people participating today, Matt, did not wake up thinking about who can I ask for $1 million. Most of the people probably thought, I hope I never have to ask anybody for $1 million. And part of that reason is because there's not this internal readiness. And I would submit that that's really the first place organizations where schools need to start is, are we ready to receive that $1 million gift? And we're gonna talk more about what does it mean to be ready, but essentially it has a couple of components. The first is our project ready to launch once we get those dollars? You know, there's a great deal of stress that comes with organizations that receive grants that they're not ready to do anything with because now they're under pressure. Now they've got to quickly try to align different people in their organization. So is your project ready? There was an experience I had where there was a community, a small community that needed a new community access hospital. And they went out and bought some land and they raised all kinds of money. But very quickly, they realized their community wasn't ready to support the entirety of the project. They weren't shovel ready. They ended up suspending the project and giving all the money back. And that goes back probably now 15 years. That community access hospital is still not yet built because they lost the trust of the community. So before you go out, is your project, as we're calling it, shovel ready? And it doesn't mean expansion of the building. Let's be clear about that. It just means uh, as a way to describe, are you ready to put the work in? Is the ground ready for your project? The second component that will fit in this framework, and we'll talk a bit more about this as we go on, is is your school district, is your school board behind the project? It's very difficult to get projects like this going if you don't have that district level support. And when I say and budget already committed, I don't mean it's a line item in the budget. What I mean is that are you well aware of what it's going to take to move from point A to point B to get this done? And then number three, and this is key, is this project something that's going to connect with the partners in your community? Because if it's only internal, if you're only thinking about how is this going to help me as an educator or me as my students, we're missing a big swath of the opportunity. Does your project build on what industry in STEM education needs? And if you got all 3 of those things ready to go, you're probably going to have a really good project to talk about when it's time to push go.
But it really speaks to the idea that we've got to take the time and make sure that these questions are answered. And part of the benefit of that is as you're going through these steps, it really gives you tremendous credibility when you're going out to potential donors to know that these things are done. You know, the shovel ready idea. There's a saying from the old Field of Dreams movie where they say, "If you build it, they will come." And my line has always been, "If you build it and they do come, you better be ready." For exactly the reason that you just stated, is that if you build this idea and you're ready and you've got donations flowing in, but you don't have a project that's ready to launch, obviously that's a concern. And to your point, a tremendous opportunity or missed opportunity when you could have built a ton of credibility. The idea that we've got the support of the school district, of the district administrator, of the superintendent, if we're a teacher, of our principal, making sure that we've got folks behind us that are standing there ready to support this project. And then, yeah, I can't emphasize enough that third one either, the economically vital side of it. And a lot of your donors are going to be asking that question. What is how is this tied to talent creation? How does it tie to opportunities for students? How does it tie to filling a need in industry or in the employment base? So really, really important questions. And the fact that you put this much thought and strategy into this topic, Michael, I think really speaks to your credibility as an expert in this particular subject matter. Speaking of putting a ton of time into things, I want to talk now about the components of the case for support. And before we dive into these in detail, maybe just a little discussion about those components from a high level, so we can get our audience a little familiar with what we're going to talk about for the next 20 or 30 minutes.
I don't want to minimize what we're talking about in terms of being internally ready. And really, when you think of a case for support, more than half of these steps are getting organizations internally ready to do the job of raising the funds to fund their $1 million idea. And although we speak a lot about the importance of putting the right gift chart together or having the right scope of the project, some of the partnership work that we're doing, Matt, as you know, is getting organizations, getting school districts aligned. And so if you're a participant, you say, geez, I just can't get my teacher or I can't get my CTE coordinator to get on board with this, know that part of what we can partner you with on is smoothing that out. So just overview, we're going to take these in threes as we go through the rest of our time together. But we're going to start with an executive summary, and oftentimes this feels like we shouldn't start here. And you probably been advised in the past that the executive summary should be done last. But I look at it this way: I took dance lessons one time, maybe against my desire, but my wife wanted to do that, and the dance instructor brought us into the room, and she walked us to the other side of the room, and she put us in this weird, awkward position, and she said, "Now, I don't care how you get here, but this is the pose you need when you're done with these moves." And then she walked us back, and believe it or not, knowing where we were ending up really helped us start off. And that's exactly why I'm encouraging people to write the executive summary first. We'll talk more about that. We move through making sure that the vision is clear, that you ask this question of yourself: if only we had blank, then we could do blank so that our students could achieve blank. We'll talk more about that and how that relates to fundraising. Making sure the request is crystal clear. We don't want to create a sense of donor anxiety or donor remorse because they don't know how their gift is going to be used. And then ultimately, as I said last time, and I say frequently, is we have to stop packing and start traveling. And that's the call to action, which we'll address later in today's webinar.
Can't wait to get through all nine of these points. I want to maybe start by dwelling a little bit on the first three, Michael. And I think one of the things that's really, really important is that we have to kind of know where we're starting. We have to know what we're already doing, what's working well, where our district stands, and so on. And really, as I look at these first three, that's kind of at the heart of what we're going to talk about here. So maybe you could cover those first three items in terms of getting level set on what we already know and what we're already doing before we go out into the community and work on our fundraising activities.
Let's go to the first component, Melissa. When we look at, as I was talking about the executive summary, having that end in mind, this is an opportunity for whoever's charged in your district or at your school to create the project scope, is to answer the question, what are we really going to do? How much is it going to cost us to do this, and by when? It essentially sets up a promise, both internally, that as you gather the stakeholders internally that have to help lead the project forward, that they're gonna be committed to this, the how much, and by when. And equally important, it's a testament to the community that you are ready to do this. Because ultimately, the people that will be working with school districts, they care about how long it will take to move from where you are to where you wanna be. We don't have years and years and years to gather someone's gift. I've seen it too often. We go out and what we call a lead gift, those first couple of gifts that help fund a project. And then it's 2 or 3 years later, and we haven't used the first dollar raised. we have to be ready to have a pretty good cadence to use those first gifts the way the donor intended us to be used, and it's ready to go. So the executive summary really helps identify and answer those questions. What are we going to do? And is this realistic of how much we really need and by when? I want to put a little cautionary remark on the how much. We tend to overestimate the amount it's actually going to take us, I'm sorry, underestimate the amount it's going to take to get this project done. And we sometimes do this because we think, oh, there's no way I can ask the community for $500,000. Ask them for 1 million, because it will probably incite them more than a $500,000 project. So be realistic on the how much side. And the second area is your school is already doing things that are worthy of attention. And we're internalizing thinking that we can point to all the things that are going wrong. We don't have the literacy rates. We don't have the math scores that we want. There's no way that anybody would want. It feels like a sinking ship. But the reality, I think, is that you are doing some wonderful things that have measurable results that you can bring out to the community. Spoke with a leader recently in education, and he was delighted to share that his graduation rates were higher than they've ever been. But more importantly, the number of students who are picking a non-traditional track after a typically non-traditional track after high school, meaning they weren't going to that four-year institution, that they were, instead of having a university bound or college bound, they were more career bound. That percentages came down a little bit lower, and he was really proud about that. Those are the kinds of measurements that our community partners are looking for when it comes to deciding whether or not they want to invest in that district. So don't be shy. I would say, Matt, don't be shy of what you're already doing well. There are proven things you've got going on, and this is not an experiment. You're already doing curriculum. You've already probably got some level of CTE going on. So just how does this expand that? And then the other thing I would demonstrate in the organizational overview is what is the district leadership willing to support? Having a quote from the superintendent or the principal or the committed teacher goes a long way. And then the last point in the first section of writing a really good case for support, having that vital framework shovel ready to bring out to the community is this, is how can philanthropy, how can your support out in the community help us do more of something? It's the more of something, not the same of something, that generally helps philanthropy. Now, there will be a question sometimes people will ask, Matt, is, well, our budget won't support more of something. Excuse me. That's exactly why philanthropy comes into play. And sometimes philanthropy can be budget relieving. So you can get a gift for your building and reallocate some of those building funds to your STEM education. That, of course, all has to be done within your policies, but philanthropy can help people do more of something by budgeting, being budget enhancing or being budget relieving. And the opportunity, I want to stress this, it's not a need. People don't fund needs, people fund opportunities. And that's that more students are graduating with the skills that local industry needs.
Absolutely. It's really goes back to that word inspire that we talked about a little while ago, Michael. And it's what is somebody going to be inspired by? And are they going to be inspired by more of the same? Or are they going to be inspired by maybe covering operating costs or donating money to be used for salaries? Not that those things aren't important and necessary, but in terms of inspiring a potential donor, that's where the rubber hits the road. And it's really being able to tell that story through the executive summary. I like the way that you put that. And let's really think about, I wasn't expecting the ballroom dancing analogy, I'll be honest with you, but I like it. And in thinking about how are we going to end up in that pose, where is it that we want to be when this is completed, just to make sure that everybody's in alignment on what the goals are. And now we've got a great story to tell a potential donor. Certainly the organizational overview, making sure that we've got support across the entire organization because we've been successful in the past, and being able to show individuals, hey, when we've been entrusted with public money or private money in the past, be that through through a referendum or through our normal budget that comes from taxpayers, whatever that source of capital is, being able to show that we've been good stewards of those particular resources, really, really important. And then talking about the vision, talking about the opportunity, making people sure that people recognize that the entire organization is behind it and that we're doing something new, we're doing something more, not just trying to support our day-to-day efforts. So I love the way you characterize this. Now we're at that point where we've got to get in front of a potential partner, right? All this is great. We can write all the executive summaries that we want until we get in front of people that are going to support economically or otherwise the great work that we're doing. That's just it's academic and administrative work. Now we're getting to where the real important work happens, which is getting in front of these donors, having the right conversations. What should our audience know about that?
Well, let's go on to component number 4, Matt. And I will say this, these are in the order that they should appear in whatever document that's being created, whether we help you do that through a partnership or whether you're doing that on your own. This is not just sort of hit and miss. This is a very deliberate flow because you're setting people up for that very last step, which is to say, yes, I'm ready to do this. So let me go back then to talk about that story that I already told you that was being written in the community or being talked about. There are already people talking about education, what's right with it, what's the challenges are with it. They're already talking about industry. Where are the jobs coming from? Who's going to fill these jobs? How is our economy based on who's leaving the community or who's not? And your solution within education matches directly with some of those questions and the concerns that are all being raised. And if we said, oh, trust us, here we are, we're ready to help. Okay, that opens a dialogue. But until you can describe your specific solution to the problems that they're talking about, the challenges that they're feeling or facing, there's really not much reason for them to pay attention. And this component, though, here's our solution to address the things that we see happening with our students and in our community. Remember, I'm saying those together, right, Matt? I'm saying that it's not just about what's happening with your students, and it's not just about saying what's happening in your community. It's happening together. So describe in your document how it is that whether it's Discover AI, as we have on the slide as an example, or the robotics lab is going to directly address some of those challenger questions that individuals have. Because ultimately, we know that in order for people to say yes, the scope must be crystal clear. What you're trying to do, your solution must be crystal clear. So make sure you spend time on this. This is a pretty critical area where this will also be where people have disagreements. No, I don't think we should do that. I think we need to do that. And that's where being prepared for shovel ready is important. And number 5, the next step is, where are we going to end up when this all gets done? How are we going to measure our success? And this too can be an area where some people have some different ideas about what constitutes success. Some might say, well, if we can turn the lights on and there's a new robot sitting there, that's good. Or if we can have a teacher who wants to come to our school to teach because we have these services and solutions, that's great. There's interest in that. But ultimately, whatever matters to you most needs to be able to be measured. It's whether it's the teacher has a set of ideas about what needs to get done, or you see some student data increasing the opportunities for employment after graduation into a high wage job. Those are the kinds of things, again, you're connecting the solution to the impact and the outcomes you have a feeling your program is going to attain. Matt, when I talk about that feeling, one of the things I want to make sure we talk about is that we know that none of this is guaranteed. There's gotta be some nimbleness in these projects, but directionally, we have to be headed in the right direction. So don't spend too much time thinking about, is this absolutely the outcomes we're gonna get? Because they may not be, and they should be directionally correct, but not absolute. And then in the 5th area, when we talk about this opportunity in terms of inspiring and invitation, is think about the natural partners you already have. Some of those natural partners you may have written down in the first part of our webinar today, where you were thinking about those 3 individuals or those companies or their partnerships that you already had. But who else is the natural partner? Do you have a big employer in your community who's looking to fill open positions? And instead of talking about funding a robot or investing in Discovery AI. The funding request should should reflect your school's investment in the workforce, or it is investment in the community. And as we said here in this example, funding this project secures your own talent pipeline for the next decade. We're not necessarily asking for a gift, we're inviting a gift. We're inviting their partnership so that they can do what they already need to do, and that's to get good, able, skilled individuals into their companies. The funding request, I will also just say, has sometimes a tendency, like, if we don't do this, we won't be able to do that. And I like to flip that around. I said, when we receive the gift, we will be able to do X, so our students will be able to do Y, so we experience Z in the community. I gave that example a little bit earlier. So think very, very positively that you're not trying to take care of a problem necessarily. You're trying to solve, give a solution to a problem or a challenge that already exists. And the funding request should reflect that.
And I think about that, Michael, in terms of your number four, your solution. And when you talk about something like Discover AI, where students are learning the edge to cloud continuum and how physical artificial intelligence is going to transform the workplace, and how we have to make sure that we've got students that are ready for that workplace of the future, or whether it's a student that's learning about macros and jogging and computer programming and controllers and end of arm tooling in a robotics program, or whether they're learning about smart sensors and smart devices and smart manufacturing technology and data acquisition and analysis and pattern finding in manufacturing through an Industry 4.0 program. You start talking about those kind of things with employers, you start talking about those kind of things with community members. And to your point, this is what we're able to do with these kind of investments, is create in our community the workforce of the future. That's good for the community, that's good for employers, that's good for students, and that's good for donors. And so it's really talking about, to your point, in the positive, where we're going with this entire project. We talk about impact and outcomes, and I will tell you, I've been involved in a number of these projects where educators are a little bit surprised by the fact that their donors, especially if they're coming from the world of private industry, not just manufacturing but industry in general, they're serious about measuring us to some outcome and being able to state specifically what we're going to accomplish and how we're measuring success, and being willing to be held accountable to that goes a huge, huge way in terms of winning the hearts and minds and the confidence of your partners, knowing that you're willing to be measured and you're willing to be responsible for making those promises that you're making in that moment come true in the future. So really, really important. I think you covered on some great things. Now we get to the point where, all right, we're kind of at that precipice where we've got somebody excited about what we're doing. They understand the value to the community. They understand maybe the value to them as an employer. We've signed up for being measured. We're ready to make that request. And now we have to talk about how we run that ball over the finish line in a way that's comfortable, but also challenges both sides of the equation to take that next step, given the trust that we've built in each other, and really talking about the funding itself. So let's talk about, for lack of a better term, closing the deal and what needs to happen in these last three phases.
Yeah, we talk about closing the deal in a way that is designed to be inspirational for everybody, because it's not a one-way street. When we talk about how we're getting our students ready for the future of work, whether it's in their community or nearby regionally, we also have to remember that we can become partners. Teachers can become industry mentors, and if they think about having another ally inside a school to get students ready for their preferred future, it really just goes a long way in closing that loop or closing that deal. So let's look at the next component, component number 7, which is the budget. And there's a component here within the budget that is not solely relied on by external support in terms of philanthropy, or maybe what you would consider just sort of the levy for education. This is an opportunity for you to show what the district is already committing to getting students ready for their future in STEM education or in any field that they're entering. Some of the components, Matt, that we would see here would be, believe it or not, it is the aggregate of what we're already spending on salaries for the teachers who are teaching in this particular curriculum area. Don't forget about that. Don't forget about any of the staff aides or people who are coming in to support the students. So that's part of the budget that's shown here. We've worked with some schools that when they're putting together their budget and they're showing the commitment that the school district already has, they're including what allocation of utilities they're using based on whatever their utility allocation per square foot is and how much space in the building is taken up for STEM education. They're showing a commitment by their CTE coordinator or the person at their foundation who's writing Perkins grants to help support their project. So there's a number of different components that when you put together your budget, what we're doing here is we're showing that our overall budget is, let's say, $1 million, but every single year our school district is committing $350,000 to that. Therefore, we need about $650,000 more through philanthropy. So you're in this section, you're showing what the district's commitment already is to the things you're doing and the willingness to support that going forward. Sometimes that shows up in a referendum or a bond issue. Sometimes that's not included in that. But when it is, it's important to show all of the ways, not just some of the ways that the school is already supporting these initiatives. In the next segment, as we're leading to the end of our case document, is the leadership of the who's going to be doing this and is it sustainable? If you were with us the last webinar, part one, you may remember that there are 3 reasons why people decide to make a gift. The first is that they trust the leadership. It's not because they get their name on a building or a tax break. It's because they trust the leadership. And the second, which we've already addressed, is that they believe in the mission. And when you have those 2 things at the top, generally, of everyone's list about why they decide to make a gift, it's imperative to show that the superintendent or the highest level leader in the organization is supporting this initiative, from the operating cost to the scope of the project in terms of philanthropy. We cannot afford to leave this out of a document. This can come in the form of a quote, actual budget numbers, or a combination of both, but it's showing a district committee commitment. The sustainability part. And this is where I want to make a distinction between writing a grant and inviting individual support. When you write a grant, there's generally the question is, how do you expect to operate this program once the grant dollars expire or they're used? And that's very difficult for people to answer with any sort of absolute certainty, because they may say, well, we'll write another grant, or we'll figure it out, or we expect that this program is going to drive enrollment, so we're going to have more students coming and therefore get more state dollars. Whatever it is, that's generally not a solid answer when it comes to grant writing. But on the individual side, what it gives us an opportunity to do is actually build deeper relationships, deeper partners with individuals who want to see the school district continue to thrive and do well. And so the conversation about sustainability is not, this isn't a one and done gift. We'd really like to invite your support for 2 or 3 years, or how about the next 4 years? And once that happens, you have a committed individual or a committed family or a committed foundation to wanting to support that. So talk about the importance of developing a long-term relationship with donors, and that you're not going to abandon the project in a couple of years. It may mean making some internal decisions to allocate additional resources if you see or feel like they're lightening up in this area of STEM education. But ultimately, the strong sustainability just comes from a really strong philanthropy program. And then the last point here is the call to action. I can't say enough, stop packing and start traveling. And most people feel like it's really daunting to ask somebody for a gift. And when do this. I used last time, exchange the word invite for ask. So you want to invite somebody in. And if that still feels a little uncomfortable, the call to action, that that you have whatever amount of time, whether it's a 12-month window, an 18-month window, that's generally about the length it might take to get a project like this off the ground, is that you're inviting them on behalf of the students. On behalf of the students who I see who are getting ready for their future, who I know that if they were sitting in front of you today, would be so excited by the opportunities that we're providing for them at XYZ High School, that they would welcome your support for their endeavors and their future. So don't feel like you're always asking for yourself. You're really asking, and the call to action is to name the opportunity that's going to help students succeed, that the students are ready to accept this challenge for their future, that they're the components that we have in this case for support that you just read about are real and they'll have real impact. And we just need them to create that spark. So the call to action is both internally, we're ready to go, but it's also the call to action to the donors. With your help, we can ensure that students who are challenged by X will receive Y so they can get ready for Z. It's a very, very simplified story that needs to be told. It doesn't have to be 100 stories. It just has to be 2 or 3 really good ones. And I think our participants today will see a real response to, yes, I can do that. I want to be the spark. Now, well, my last point about calling to action that I think we need to sprinkle a little reality on this, Matt. About a third of the people you invite to support you will do exactly what you wanted them to do when you wanted them to do it. So that means we have to actually have more conversations with more people because we're not going to get everything we ask for or that we invite. So a third will do what you ask them. A third will wait to see if other people have joined in the initiative, and so they will do some of what you asked them for, waiting and then maybe giving. And then a third of the individuals may not give at all. But I can tell you this from experience that the number of donors who have come forward after a project has already been complete has been almost disproportionate to the number of people who have said no during the process. Why? They wanted to see proof that we were serious about painting the project that we talked about in the very beginning of our project. And so they're waiting for evidence that their gift is safe. And so that allows you then to do more of something, again, not the same as something. So make sure there's a call to action.
I'll underscore that, Michael. I was, as you know, a chair of a pretty major construction project for a nonprofit organization about 4 or 5 years ago, and we worked with a major development organization that helped us build the case for support in that particular instance. And I will tell you that that is exactly what happened. Is that there's a lot of folks that initially said no or maybe and didn't give. That as soon as they saw, bricks going up, and as soon as they saw interiors getting completed, there's like this sense of, number one, okay, these guys were serious. This is legit. That my money isn't just going to be, thrown away. And number two, I want to be a part of this. This is really cool, which really kind of speaks to the idea that this is something that it's not a one and done conversation, that it is an ongoing relationship. And I absolutely love the way that you characterized on behalf of the students. We'd like to invite you to consider providing a gift for this project. And that's not being duplicitous or sneaky. The truth of the matter is that's who we're asking it for. None of us are engaging in major vision or projects like this just for our own egos. This is really about doing the right things for students, communities, and employers. And when you ask it that way, it really changes the conversation from, hey, will you do me a favor and support this project, to let's do this for the people that need it most, for the students in our community, for the future of our community. And I think that's just a great, great way to characterize it. Also love this 9-step process that you put together, almost a playbook, if you will, of how we think about our development and our fundraising efforts. And I think it's a really, really great process for individuals to consider as they're looking at how they grow their programs and how they fund their programs. I think it's also important, Michael, for people to recognize that it isn't just about the donor. It's not just about the superintendent. We've got all kinds of people that are engaging, all organizations that are engaging in this important work. And I just want you to cover a little bit about the different stakeholders that might be involved in a project like this, just to give our audience some sense of who's going to play a part in the process.
Yes. There's I say they engage the right partners because candidly, there are some wrong partners, and the wrong partners aren't the ones who are going to say no eternally. They're just not the ones who are ready to say yes right now. And so, as people think through who are they going to invite into the fold, how are they going to expand their network to help with their success in philanthropy and fundraising, most of us will be very limited in our view. Our lens will be narrow. We'll only be thinking about industry partners. As we shared the last time, less than 10% of philanthropic gifts comes from corporations, and yet we're focused there. And that's okay because it makes sense because that 10% to $617 billion is still a lot of money. So it's okay to be thinking about industry opportunities in terms of where your support's going to come from. But let's widen the view. Let's widen the scope. Start with the community. Are there parent groups already or individuals, local civic organizations who already support or would love to support what you're doing? And how do you invite them into that story? On the foundation side, if you're focused only on industry and you widen your lens to the community and widen it to the foundations, there are foundations, not necessarily just in your community, but maybe in your state, maybe regionally, who are looking to support multi-year grants that go beyond a single gift. It takes a little bit of work. If you have a community foundation in your community, I would start there. Make an appointment with the program director, figure out what their priorities are this year, what their donor priorities are this year. And sometimes these community organizations are looking, community foundations, I'm sorry, are looking for a place to hold their quarterly meetings with their donors. Schools are a great place for that. There are so many people that we think because we're in education, everybody must have been in a high school lately or a middle school. And that's simply not true. So you have an opportunity to expand your partnerships by welcoming them in. And so that would leave me at, the bottom part of this particular slide, building trust with prospective givers. Lead with the stories that you're writing for your community through education. Lead with the stories of the students who are making a difference in their life and in their work. Show, as we said earlier, that the district already has skin in the game. You're not asking the community to do anything that you're not already doing as an institution. This third point, invite partners in before you invite the gifts. Welcome industry leaders and partners in for a tour. Ask if they can be mentors. Have them be a guest speaker in a class. As Matt, you said the last time, if you want someone's gift, ask them for their advice. And that's not a bad way to start. And then ultimately report on the good work that you're doing. What are those fantastic results that you're experiencing? Not just more need, because people get tired of needs. And in fact, they have their own needs. And now more and more, sometimes they have even more needs, but still too that in cooperation, we can show results ahead of needs that will actually garner support to do more of something, not the same as something.
And somebody who's been in a lot of these meetings and through a lot of these processes might go there again. It's exactly the way people need to be thinking about this. And you can almost tie the report, the results, and the lead with the stories together. I think about getting up in front of audiences and talking about students that took a one semester course in, for example, robot programming and operations and landing jobs that were literally right out of high school, $70,000 a year programming, in that case, Fanuc robots in a manufacturing environment. That particular discipline was that much in need in that community. You see students that are going through a Discover AI course and they're learning for the first time how to do 3D design and fabrication or understanding smart manufacturing or really understanding in a physical way how an autonomous vehicle works and being able to explain how the edge to cloud continuum and how sensors and devices on the edge are gathering information, how artificially intelligent systems can do everything from see and think and act and communicate with each other completely autonomously. And when people hear these stories and they see these stories of success, students getting these hands-on experiences and then going on to right to the workforce, which is awesome, into the military, to a two-year technical college, sometimes even to a four-year engineering program where they're coming back and saying, look at all of these things that I learned in a hands-on way that made me that much better of a student when I got to came after high school, or that much better in the workforce based upon having these competencies taught to me while I was in high school and learning them in a hands-on way. Those are the kind of stories that really resonate with givers, and that's the point at which, looking back over your shoulder, you say, I was happy to participate. I was happy to be a part of this. I was inspired toward this organization's vision, but to see the actual physical outcome in the form of a student leaving a program toward a better life, in the form of an employer having access to talent they wouldn't have otherwise had. That is what this is absolutely all about. And doing it in a way that shows that the system and the district isn't just asking for money, they're making investments of their own treasure and resources as well, and making sure that you're inviting people to be part of this partnership, not just that you're looking for their money. Really, really important. And I think it's really a good way for me to tee up the last and final question I have for you before we entertain any questions from the audience. And let's talk about that sustained partnership. What does it take to go from these initial conversations, that first gift on the part of a donor, to a relationship that's mutually beneficial for years and years to come?
While not universally true, Matt, It's generally thought that it would take about 20 years for a person to make their first gift before between what they then make as their $1 million gift. So this is a long-term investment. And so when we talk about integrating stories and confirming what the school district is going to do with those questions and challenges that people are already talking about at the coffee shop, absolutely essential in this case document as you put your plan together. There's gotta be a piece there that is gonna be inspirational, and I know I've already said this a couple times where philanthropy should help you do more of something, not the same of something. Make sure that's what it is, in terms of your vision and your scope, and if you have, trouble coming up with it, there are some exercises that organizations and teams can do to rub out where the friction is and get settled and moving forward. And then the informing part, the gift relationship doesn't end when the gift is received. That's really only the beginning of how is it that we continue to build trust and deepen that trust with committed individuals to our students. And once we do that, are there ways to involve them? Can we bring them back as a multi-year donor? Can they come in, as I mentioned earlier, to serve as a mentor? Because they're going to become just as invested in the project as you are, if not more so. I can't tell you the number of times, but it's been a many how many times people have given a significant gift and have apologized because they couldn't do more. And when you get to that point in the relationship, then you know you've integrated them. You've inspired them to beyond measure. You've kept them informed and you're finding ways to involve them. And the bottom line is this: when we have the leadership that people can trust, when we can show that there's a mission and a vision and a commitment to that, to collectively, and when we can invite somebody in and invite them to support, that's when we say the students are ready, the school is ready, and Mr. and Mrs. Donor, will you provide the spark?
Love it. The students are ready. The school is ready. Mr. and Mrs. Donor, will you provide the spark? And now we have to make sure that our audience is ready to take that next step. I said we'd go to audience questions, and I'm going to pose one that I know is on everybody's mind before we ask Melissa to tell us what she's hearing from the audience. And that is if I'm inspired by this, I'm excited by this, sometime in the next 30 days, I need to take action. What are those things or one thing that I can do between now and Labor Day that is really, really important for me to get started?
Ask yourself this question. If someone walked and knocked on your door and said, here's $1 million, what would you do with it? And if that hasn't been yet defined in your mind as a teacher or a CTE leader or superintendent or principal, this is the next 30 days to do that. Make sure you know how you would use $1 million. Get to that end of the dance step. I've got $1 million. Now what am I going to do and back up in all the steps? But waiting idly for somebody to come to your door and give you the $1 million, not such a good idea. Prepare for it and then go out and invite it.
Prepare for it. And as our audience is thinking about if somebody gave you $1 million, what would you do with it? If you're having any trouble at all figuring that out, I've got some great teammates at Lab Midwest, ATS Midwest, and Mission Learning Systems that would love to be a resource to you in visioning out what the future can look like. With that, Melissa, I'm going to hand it over to you. What are we hearing from our audience?
Thanks, Matt. Perfect. So we got a couple of great audience questions. The first one is kind of coming back. This person submitted the question back when we were talking about executive summaries. So they said putting together any proposal can take time. What has been your experience in who should be responsible in the district to get that work done? In other words, I worry about burdening the teachers with one more thing.
Can I give a quick answer, Michael, and then I'll hand it off to you? Or maybe we're
Sure.
going to get the same answer, but I'm gonna pick that up where I left the last one off. And again, trying not to make this a commercial for the work that we do. A big thing that our team members do is exactly this, right? So we take the work off of your shoulders and help you through that process. So if there's anybody that is saying, "Well, I've got a full-time job teaching, leading a district, what have you, and I need some help on that," I know there are, again some great people that would love to be a part of that and would literally with your ideas and your input and heavily weighing what's right for you, your students, your community, and your employers, really help you dial in on that message. And Michael, what would you add to that?
I'm very similar. I was going to say, spread out the responsibility. There are people who have expertise in these areas who are willing to help. You might even have some in your own community, in addition to the team that Matt just described, or even the partnership that we have. So I think you get a better result actually, the more people you have involved, provided you don't get too big and you get a little discombobulated. Keep it to 3 or 4 people, spread out the wealth, and I think you'll come up with some really good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks to both of you. All right. The next question says a lot of what we've heard has been relative to educational institutions seeking funding. Is this applicable for nonprofits who offer expanded educational services?
Well, that is a really good question. And thanks for asking it, whomever did that. When I think about the formula, the recipe for philanthropic success, I would overlay these 9 steps onto any one of those particular organizations. And in fact, I would say if you are an outside entity or a third party who are offering educational services, you have a built-in natural partnership with the school. Collectively, I can attest to the fact that when people are looking to support organizations, when you can put a consortium together, you may have a easier chance getting an audience with those potential funders because their gift then is used more broadly and more deeply, and it is a wise investment when they can see people working together for the same common goal.
We've certainly worked with a number of nonprofits in our organization, and I would say that a lot of the same principles apply to Michael's point. And it's certainly the approach might be a little bit different in terms of access to funding, the types of funding you might be using for matching funds, how you approach a potential donor. But I have seen this work incredibly well with a lot of the organizations that we've been a part of in terms of creating educational programs within nonprofit, whether it's an after school program, whether it's a summer camp, whether it's some other endeavor that folks are doing to reach underserved students. We see manufacturing organizations, a lot of times private organizations, nonprofits in that space that are doing really important work. And I would think that the same steps in terms of making sure that you're finding the right people, inspiring them in the right way, inviting them to the table, asking for their advice, not just looking for their money and making them a part of that journey would absolutely resonate in the nonprofit world itself.
Oh, perfect. Appreciate that. So the next question actually came up. This individual posted it while we were back talking about how districts should have some of their budget allocated towards this project to show that they have skin in the game. So, Michael, is there a percentage? How much should the district expected to put in? Is there a percentage that results in better results when they're asking for support?
Coming out of the gate, I would respond with the answer of no. I think some level of investment is important. As the program grows, there would be a expectation, I think, that the district's commitment also would grow. Ultimately, though, I think philanthropy, if it gets to the be where the district is supporting it by about 50%, and the philanthropy is supporting it about 50%, I think that's pretty realistic at least to get that baseline of operations, get the program up and running or expand the program that you currently have. And as it grows, those numbers can fluctuate, but just have something invested is a good indicator that you're equally committed to the endeavor.
And be sure that you're taking credit for the investment you're making on the operating side would be something I would add to that. So you're paying teacher salaries, you're heating the building, you're providing the space, you're providing the administrative support. You may be committing to ongoing curriculum costs, curriculum development, what have you. So make sure that when you're thinking about the district side of it, it's not just the capex, the building, the equipment, but it's those ongoing expenses. And really, I think, Michael, what those donors are looking for is to make sure, to your point, everybody has skin in the game. And there's lots of ways for a district to establish and demonstrate to a potential donor that they're making a significant investment right alongside the donors. It doesn't always have to go toward the same exact purposes, but they're partners in the endeavor, and they're both putting significant resources into the outcomes.
Well said.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and a whole stack of thank yous that we want to make sure we establish. Certainly to Melissa for doing a phenomenal job as she does, producing and making sure that the rest of us are ready for webinars like this. Absolutely phenomenal. To my guest and good friend, Michael Frona, you can tell that he is so passionate about this topic of development. He's incredibly good at it. He has a great way of going about it, building trust over time, keeping commitments, keeping his word. I couldn't ask for a better person to have as a member of our team, as a teammate in this endeavor of working with school districts to get potential donors excited about the great things that are happening in STEM and technical education. And finally, to all of you who have joined us last week, this week on YouTube, however you are tapping into this content, let us know that you're out there. We'd love to hear from you. Reach out to the members of the Lab Midwest, the ATS Midwest, and the Mission Learning Systems team. We want to be part of your efforts. We'll never try to sell you anything. We'll never push anything on you. You know your communities, your students, your employers, and yourself ourselves way better than we ever could. But to the extent that we can be of service, we would love nothing more. Thanks so much for being with us these last 2 weeks. And on behalf of the ATS Lab Midwest Mission Learning Systems team, Michael Frona and Melissa Martin, thanks for being with us.